Have you ever had a moment where reality felt slightly out of sync, like you walked into a place you'd never been, yet your body reacted as if it remembered it, or you thought of someone you hadn't spoken to in years only to see their name appear minutes later, and instead of curiosity, you felt a quiet discomfort you couldn't explain? Not fear, not excitement, just the deep sense that something about your life never fully clicked into place. Most people dismiss that feeling and move on, but some don't. They carry it through childhood, through school, through jobs and relationships, always sensing they're slightly out of rhythm with the world around them. You do what you're supposed to do. You play the role. You show up. And yet there's a persistent feeling that you're observing life from the outside, never fully belonging to the script everyone else seems comfortable following. This isn't alienation for the sake of drama. It's a pattern that shows up again and again in people experiencing shifts in quantum consciousness, where awareness begins to notice the hidden layers beneath ordinary routines. Studies on perception and observer interaction suggest that reality isn't just something we pass through, but something we participate in, often without realizing it. And when that awareness begins to surface, it creates friction. You start questioning why familiar environments feel unfamiliar, why conversations feel rehearsed, why success defined by others never satisfied you. If this sounds familiar, it's not because something is wrong with you. It's because your perception may be tuning into a hidden reality most people never pause long enough to sense. The unsettling part isn't that you never felt you belonged. It's why that feeling exists in the first place. And before you decide what it means, there's one critical insight, rooted in both experience and science, that changes how you see yourself entirely. And once you hear it, you won't be able to unsee it. Before we go any further, understand this. What you're feeling isn't isolated. It's shared. And when people who notice the same patterns quietly recognize each other, something shifts. Engaging with this video isn't a casual action, it's alignment. A way of signaling that you're part of a smaller group that refuses to numb itself with distractions or easy answers. Think of it as a silent agreement among observers who are done pretending they fit into a world that never quite fit them back. Joining this channel isn't about following a creator. It's about entering a conscious movement where awareness is sharpened, not diluted, and where questions are treated with seriousness, not fear. Before we move on, leave a trace, not for validation, but for resonance. In the comments, write this phrase exactly as it feels to you. I was never meant to blend in. It's not a declaration of superiority. It's an acknowledgement of perception. Others who read it will understand immediately. Now stay with me, because what comes next isn't personal opinion or spiritual language. It's the scientific evidence that explains why this sense of not belonging appears in the first place, and how awareness itself becomes the missing variable most people never learn to recognize. What comes next is where this stops being a feeling and starts being measurable. In 1983, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet at the University of California, San Francisco, UCSF, conducted an experiment that quietly unsettled both science and philosophy. Libet was studying conscious decision-making. Participants were asked to perform a simple action, like moving a finger, whenever they felt the urge to do so, while their brain activity was being recorded. What Libet discovered shocked the mainstream. The brain showed measurable electrical activity hundreds of milliseconds before the person became consciously aware of their decision. In other words, the body acted before the mind said now. This finding challenged the core assumption that conscious will initiates action. Instead, it suggested that awareness doesn't start decisions. It observes them emerging from a deeper layer of the quantum field of neural activity. Later interpretations connected this to the observer effect, proposing that consciousness doesn't create impulses, but it selects, inhibits, or amplifies them once noticed. And this means that you are not failing to belong because you're broken or indecisive. It means your awareness may be operating at a different layer. People who feel out of place often report the same internal experience. They notice reactions forming before they act, emotions rising before they identify them, impulses they don't immediately obey. That pause, the space between impulse and action, isn't weakness. It's consciousness expansion. Libet himself noted something critical. While the brain initiates impulses unconsciously, conscious awareness still has the power to veto them, to stop them, to redirect them. That moment of observation changes the outcome. Most people never feel that gap. They react instantly. They blend in because they're moving automatically. But when you feel that hesitation, when life feels slightly delayed, slightly misaligned, it's often because awareness has stepped in. You're no longer fused with the script, you're watching it. That can feel isolating, confusing, even uncomfortable, but it also means you're not running on default settings anymore. And this leads to the next question science couldn't avoid. If consciousness can interrupt and reshape action at the individual level, what happens when awareness becomes sustained, when perception itself stabilizes? Because the next discovery suggests that consciousness doesn't just pause reality, it begins to synchronize with it. This is where the data begins to describe what your body may already be feeling. In the 1990s, researchers at the HeartMath Institute, led by Dr. Roland McCready, began studying heart-brain coherence. What they discovered challenged the idea that the brain alone governs awareness. Using EEG and heart rate variability measurements, they found that when a person enters a state of sustained attention and emotional regulation, the heart and brain synchronize into a coherent pattern. Signals become ordered. Communication between systems sharpens. The nervous system stabilizes. This coherence doesn't stay internal. The electromagnetic field produced by the heart becomes more structured, more measurable, and more interactive with the surrounding quantum field. In simple terms, when internal systems align, the body enters resonance with its environment. And this explains why moments of awareness often arrive with physical sensations before thoughts. That sudden clarity behind your eyes, the tingling in your chest or hands, the quiet calm that replaces mental noise without effort. Those sensations aren't imagination. They're markers of coherence. When intuition appears, it's not random. When something clicks, it's not accidental. Your system is synchronizing. People experiencing consciousness expansion often describe the same pattern. As awareness deepens, the body responds first. Breathing slows, muscles release. A sense of presence settles in before any conclusion is reached. That's resonance taking hold. Most modern life pulls you out of this state. Constant stimulation fragments attention and keeps internal systems competing. But the moment you pause, truly observe, coherence begins to rebuild, and with it comes sensitivity. You start noticing when environments feel wrong, when conversations drain you, when your body reacts before your mind can explain why. This is where the journey becomes personal. Because once coherence increases, you don't just perceive more, you feel more. And that can be unsettling. Awareness sharpens not only clarity, but vulnerability. You begin realizing how often you've ignored your own signals just to fit in. And that realization carries an emotional weight most people aren't prepared for. There's a part of this awareness that doesn't get celebrated, and it should be acknowledged honestly. Because carrying this level of perception can feel lonely. You notice more, but you talk less. You sense shifts in people and situations, but explaining them feels exhausting. You start questioning your own reactions, wondering if you're becoming distant, or just more careful with where you place your energy. There are moments of doubt, moments where you ask yourself if life was easier before you noticed patterns, before you felt the pause between impulse and action, before you sensed when something was off but couldn't prove it. There's fear in that space, fear of being misunderstood, fear of drifting away from people you still care about, fear that seeing clearly might cost you connection. I won't pretend that awareness only brings peace. Sometimes it brings silence. Sometimes it brings nights where clarity feels heavier than confusion ever did. And sometimes it brings the uncomfortable realization that you've been adapting yourself just to belong, ignoring signals you now can't unfeel. But here's what matters. That weight isn't a flaw. It's a transition. It's the tension that appears when an old identity can no longer hold a new level of understanding. And if any of this resonates, if you've felt that mix of insight and isolation, know this: you're not alone in it. Even if it feels that way, you don't need to explain yourself here. You don't need to perform certainty. Just allow yourself to recognize that what you're experiencing has meaning and that others are navigating the same quiet shift. Because what comes next isn't about carrying awareness as a burden. It's about learning how to stand inside it with strength, clarity, and intention, without shrinking yourself to fit a world you've already outgrown. This is where the story reframes itself, because the thing you've spent years questioning, the sense of being different, misaligned, never quite fitting into the rhythm everyone else follows, was never a flaw in you. It was perception expanding before the language existed to explain it. What once felt like alienation was sensitivity. What felt like restlessness was awareness pushing past inherited limits. And what felt like not belonging was your system refusing to collapse reality into something smaller than what you were actually sensing. Look back at what you've just seen. Observation alters outcome. Coherence reorganizes perception. Resonance changes interaction. None of these discoveries were abstract theories floating above your life. They described it. The pauses you feel before reacting. The physical signals that arrive before logic. The discomfort with surface-level explanations. Science didn't expose something foreign. It mirrored your experience. This is the key most people never receive. Expanded perception doesn't make you separate from reality. It makes you aware of how deeply involved you already are. You weren't meant to disappear into the crowd. You were meant to notice how the system works from the inside. And here, in this moment, that awareness matters. Because perception doesn't only explain the past, it shapes what happens next. When you see patterns, you stop repeating them unconsciously. When you observe your reactions, you gain choice. When awareness stabilizes, reality no longer feels like something happening to you, but something you're in dialogue with. But there's one unsettling idea I won't resolve for you yet. If perception participates in reality, if coherence changes interaction, if awareness reshapes experience, then the question isn't whether you belong in this world. It's whether the version of reality you were handed was ever complete. Sit with that. Because the next step isn't about learning another concept. It's about noticing how your perception moves through your day, your decisions, your relationships, right now. And once you start paying attention to that, something irreversible begins. What comes next will challenge not just how you see the world, but why you were able to see it differently in the first place. Before you step away, seal this moment with intention. In the comments, write this line exactly as it feels to you. I was never meant to blend in. Not as a claim of difference, but as recognition. Others who arrive here will understand immediately. If this resonated, don't treat this as a video you watched. Treat it as an entry point. Subscribing is how you remain connected to a small, disciplined circle of observers who value clarity over comfort and depth over noise. This space isn't built for everyone, and that's the point. What comes next pushes even further. The simulation has a glitch. 3 signs. You've finally woken up, your consciousness brought you here. What happens now is your choice.